This is the Cessna 402, an aircraft that gives you cubes and pounds in spades and is well suited to the dual role of business transport and commuter plane. Big, cabin-class turbocharged piston twins are a bit of a niche item these days. Too large and costly for personal transport, yet lacking sufficient performance to satisfy high-rolling corporate clients yearning for the whine of turbines and the comfort of pressurization. They're used mostly for air taxi and specialty cargo operations. But when the mission matches the capabilities of a large piston twin through accidents of geography or flight profile, they can't be beaten. Back in the 1960s, when this class of aircraft first arrived, Cessna's entries into the market were the popular 400 series. The direct competition came from Piper in the form of the PA-31 Navajo, Beech aimed higher with the Duke, which was a big step up in horsepower and cost from the Cessna and Piper entries. In the 400 series, the 402 is Cessna's workhorse, designed from the outset with commuters and cargo in mind. It was, however, available with a corporate transport-oriented interior and made a credible business craft. Its primary appeal isn't speed or aesthetics, but versatility. That versatility is impressive, and that's what helped Cessna sell more than 1,900 402s during its production run, which lasted from 1967 to 1985. Stay with us till the end of the video, because here is everything you need to know about the Cessna 402. Stepping inside, the interior features a reinforced bonded honeycomb floor and was designed to accommodate up to 10 seats, all quickly removable for conversion to cargo operations. Configured as a commuter or cargo hauler, the 402 can carry 10 passengers and 100 gallons of fuel, or a total load of more than 1.25 ton. While outfitted as a 6-place corporate transport, it can fly coast to coast with one fuel stop. Of course, it will take quite a while to make that trip compared to the turbine-powered competition, but then the 402 doesn't cost nearly as much as a prop jet. It's a pretty uncomfortable airplane on long trips. It makes you want pressurization, if only because the airplane would be quieter and more comfortable. You're sitting there droning away, and the noise level is high. Load carrying capacity, not handling, is what people buy 402s for, and this is where the airplane truly excels. The 150 cubic foot cabin wider than a 90 series King Air will carry up to a ton of people or freight. With the optional cargo door, a 47 by 40 inch hole can be opened up in the side of the fuselage for loading bulky objects. In addition, 55.5 cubic feet of storage is available outside the cabin, in 2 wing lockers for 120 pounds each, a standard 26 cubic foot nose baggage area for 350 pounds, and an optional 11 cubic foot nose compartment for 250 pounds. Non-cabin baggage areas can thus take on an amazing 840 pounds of freight. No wonder drug smugglers like this plane. Of course, all of this capacity makes overloading the 402 relatively easy, particularly if optional fuel tanks are installed. With full-ox fuel, the aircraft can carry 1,242 pounds of fuel alone. Thus, the full fuel payload for a moderately equipped 402C is on the order of 1,000 pounds. Early models were limited to a maximum of 1,200 pounds aft of the front spar, in wing lockers and/or aft cabin. We know of at least one 402 that banged its tail on the ramp when all of its passengers stepped to the rear to deplane. Perhaps it is worth noting that the wing lockers are not really suited to carrying anything but the lightest of light-duty baggage. The bottoms of the locker bays are wingskin structure. Even if padded carpeting is in place, it is easy to dent the underwing skins, a point that prospective buyers should bear in mind. In 1969, the 402 got a stretched nose for added baggage space and was redesignated the Cessna 402A. The advent of the 402B the following year saw optional fuel go to 184 gallons, nearly all are so equipped, and in the following years, numerous improvements were made to the 402B. In 1971, window posts, instrument panel trim, and control yokes became standard safety features, and an engine nacelle fire extinguishing system was offered as an option. In 1972, heat-resistant silicone engine shock mounts were introduced, along with stainless steel turbocharger heat shields. Also, a simpler exhaust system was made standard. Access was improved to the landing gear and flap motors, and a new landing gear system featuring an oral annunciator coupled to the throttles and the flap pre-select switch was incorporated. In 1973, the familiar Cessna portholes were replaced on the 402B with rectangular windows for an increase of 711 square inches in window area. The cabin interior was lengthened by 16 inches. A fold-down instrument panel for easier access was made standard. Optional fuel went to 207 gallons. An avionics master was added, and improved turbo controllers were made standard. In 1975, a known icing option equipment package was offered. In 1977, polyurethane paint became standard, and an optional flushing toilet was offered. And finally, in 1978, a halon cabin fire extinguishing system was offered to put out avionics and nose baggage compartment fires. Now let's talk about the engine, performance specifications, and how it flies. The Cessna 402 is powered by a pair of Continental TSCO 520 engines. These horizontally opposed six-cylinder, air-cooled engines are turbocharged and fuel-injected, delivering the performance necessary for the aircraft's versatile operational roles. The specific model of the engine varies slightly depending on the variant. Early models, such as the original 402, utilized the Continental TSIO 520E engines, while later models like the 402C were equipped with the TSEIO 520VB engines. Each engine on the Cessna 402C produces 325 horsepower at 2,700 RPM, and they are equipped with a three-blade, constant speed, fully feathering propeller, which enhances overall efficiency, particularly in single-engine operations. Cessna's 400 series twins are not noted for their crisp handling. Nonetheless, the series is generally given the nod for honest flight characteristics, albeit the mass of the fuel in the tip tanks tends to make the early models a bit less responsive in roll than the 402C. As you might expect in an airplane that can haul 10 people, pitch stability and stick force vary with CG. The further aft the center of gravity, the lighter the elevator control, and the less stable the aircraft. At far aft CGs, according to one 402C pilot, the airplane can feel squirrely longitudinally. Yaw stability in most twins is not something you write home about, and this seems to be the case for the 402. One might suppose that the late model 402Cs, lacking the tip tanks, would dampen out yaw excursions better than the earlier models. But according to one pilot, even the 402C wiggles vigorously in turbulence without the optional yaw damper. Properly loaded, the plane turns in creditable takeoff and climb performance, even at gross weight. A fully loaded 402B lifts off after 1,695 feet of ground, roll at sea level with no wind, assuming an unstick speed of 90 knots. To clear a 50-foot obstacle under the same conditions requires 2,220 feet. Flaps are left retracted on takeoff, since Cessna's split flaps, a holdover from the 310 produce vastly more drag than lift. Once airborne, the 402 climbs initially at 1,610 FPM, or 1,450 FPM for the 402C, at 110 knots. After initial power reduction, a cruise climb of 120 knots produces 1,000 FPM, each engine burning 17 GPH. In cruise flight, an early 402 will deliver an honest 175 knots at 10,000 feet on 66% power in 2,450 RPM. Book fuel flow under those conditions is listed as 29 GPH. At 20,000 feet, the same power setting yields 195 kDHAS according to the book. But most 402s are flown at non-oxygen altitudes. The higher horsepower tip tankless 402C is slightly faster, delivering 192 knots at 10,000 feet with 72% power. Range in the older models varies from 675 miles with standard fuel, 100 gallons usable, at 72% power at 10,000 feet, to just over 1,400 miles at 55% power, and 20,000 feet with full optional fuel, 180 gallons usable, with no reserves. The 402C comes with a standard fuel capacity of 213 gallons, which gives the aircraft long legs indeed up to 1,400 miles with reserves. Some cabin payload must be sacrificed to fly with full fuel naturally, but even with all tanks topped, you can count on carrying 5 people and baggage. On landing, the 402 requires 1,765 feet past a 50-foot obstacle and 777 feet of ground roll at its maximum touchdown. Weight of 6,200 pounds, 100 below gross, while the heavier 402C requires 2,485 feet over the 50-foot obstacle and 1,055 feet of pavement. A Robertson STOL kit is available for the 402, which cuts these distances by approximately 20%. As with its chief competitors in this class, the Piper Navajos, the 402 suffers from very marginal single-engine rates of climb. At sea level, a 402B loaded to gross can only manage 225 FPM on one engine, which at the plane's VXSE engine-out best angle of climb speed of 100 knots gives a climb gradient of just 138 feet per nautical mile. Needless to say, the slightest defect in piloting technique will quickly knock such numbers into the ditch. One wonders how many commuter airline customers would willingly board a 402 if they knew the plane's engine-out performance capabilities or lack of same. The single-engine climb rate improves somewhat with the offloading of fuel or cargo, but not dramatically. According to Cessna's charts, one can expect a 150 FPM gain at sea level for every 500 pounds below gross. The VMSC minimum single-engine control speed isn't particularly good either. At 82 knots, the VMSC is 9 knots higher than the Navajos. The Robertson conversion lowers the VMC to 72 knots. Cessna lists a safe single-engine speed of 91 knots and suggests this be used as the decision speed below, which a takeoff, in the event of engine failure, should not be continued. It's worth noting, however, that the 225 FPM single-engine climb rate is predicated on an engine-out best row C speed of 102 knots plus gear and flaps retracted, cowl flap on the bad engine retracted, the faulty engine feathered, and 5 degrees of bank maintained in the direction of the good engine. If all of these conditions are not met, then the 225 FPM figure is no longer valid, even at 102 knots. On balance, Cessna's 91-knot VSRSE seems more than a trifle optimistic. Cessna's redesign of the 402 in 1979 resulted in improved engine-out performance for the C model. The 402C, while 300 pounds heavier than its predecessor, nonetheless manages a 3,100-foot higher service ceiling of 14,800 feet and can climb at 300 FPM, by no means rocket-like, but considerably better than the previous models. Interestingly, the heavier 402C requires a longer distance to accelerate and then stop, 3,740 feet for the C versus 3,055 feet for early model 402s. But the distance needed to lose an engine and then continue takeoff is less for the 402C, 2,870 feet, versus the tip-tanked 402s, 3,990 to 4,370 feet. The exact distance depends on the year model. Obviously, in any aircraft of this class, it pays to study single-engine performance charts carefully before shoving the throttle levers forward. Now let's talk about the price and cost. The base purchase price for a used Cessna 402 is $100,000 to $300,000 before options, and while the annual fixed cost is estimated at $20,000 to $30,000, the average hourly operating cost is estimated at $300 to $500. Thank you for staying with us till the end. Here are 2 videos you can watch next. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.